Imagine being born with the weight of two empires on your shoulders. It was like that with Caesarion. He came into the world on June 23, 47 BC in Alexandria, the beating heart of Egypt at the time. He was the son of Cleopatra, one of the most intelligent and strategic queens in history, and, apparently, also of Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome at the time. But here the confusion begins. Julius Caesar never publicly assumed this paternity. And it's not because he had doubts. The problem was political. In Rome, admitting a child with a foreign queen did not go well, especially for someone trying to establish themselves as absolute leader. Even so, Cleopatra hid nothing. She gave her son a long and meaningful name. Ptolemy 15, Philopator Philometor, Caesar, translated something like father's friend, mother's friend, son of Caesar, a name that said it all without needing to say anything. It was her way of shouting to the world, "This boy is of royal blood, Egyptian and Roman." The queen wasn't joking about this. She knew exactly what she wanted: to transform Caesarion into the symbol of the union between the two most influential civilizations of the ancient world. Wait a minute. Before continuing, I need your help. YouTube will only share this video with more people if it gets a lot of interaction. In other words, without your comment, this knowledge could be buried and never reach those who need it. If this content makes sense to you, comment 1. If you disagree, comment 0 and tell me why. I want to see at least 100 comments, here for YouTube to understand that this subject needs to be spread. So comment now and be part of this mission to reveal the secrets of ancient Rome. From an early age, Caesarion was treated as someone special, but not in the spoiled sense of the word. He was prepared. Cleopatra, who couldn't be bothered, wanted more than a well-educated son. She wanted to mold a ruler worthy of commanding not only Egypt, but perhaps even Rome. Therefore, he surrounded the boy with philosophers, Greek teachers, and Egyptian sages. The idea was to form a leader with the wisdom of the three most powerful cultures of the time. While the sons of kings learned to use the sword, Caesarion learned to use the mind. Everything was strategic. Every class, every public ceremony, every appearance of him at his mother's side served to reinforce his image as the legitimate heir, not only of Cleopatra, but of Julius Caesar as well. Even without official recognition from Rome, he grew up under the title of son of Caesar, and that bothered me. Very. While in Egypt, he was treated like a petty pharaoh. In Rome, he was viewed with suspicion, as a threat. But for Cleopatra, it didn't matter. She was betting everything on her son's future. And the more he grew, the more she set out to make the world believe that the next great Roman ruler had been born on Egyptian soil. Over time, young Caesarion stopped being just a symbol and became a real threat. He was not just a well-mannered boy. He was someone with the blood of a pharaoh and supposedly of Julius Caesar. This deeply bothered Octavian. Think about it with me. If this boy were recognized as Caesar's legitimate son, what would that do to the authority of Octavian, the adopted heir? It would weaken everything. All of Rome could be divided, and some might even prefer the heir by blood to the heir by will. It was a huge risk. Therefore, Octavian did not miss a chance to undermine Caesarion's image. He began to paint the boy as a danger to Rome's stability, and Cleopatra as a manipulative woman who wanted to use her son to control the empire. The propaganda was clear. Egypt wants to dominate Rome. Meanwhile, Cleopatra and Mark Antony did everything they could to reinforce Caesarion's role. They even formally proclaimed him King of Kings, a bold gesture that served as both a provocation and a promise. But the war of words would not last long. The armies were moving, and Caesarion's fate was increasingly in the hands of generals, not teachers. The time came when words were no longer enough. Octavian gathered a colossal fleet and set out to settle the dispute once and for all. On September 2nd, 31st BC, on the coast of Actium in Greece, the battle that would define the future of the ancient world took place. On one side, Mark Antony and Cleopatra, with their combined forces. On the other, Octavian, with a disciplined army and a ruthless strategy. The fighting was intense, but the ending was tragic for the Egyptians. Antony's fleet was crushed. The queen fled. The general, demoralized, retreated to Egypt. It was the beginning of the end. Caesarion watched everything fall apart. His world, which previously revolved around teachings, plans, and hope, was now filled with the urgency of survival. Egypt, which for centuries had been one of the centers of power on the planet, was about to bow to Roman rule. With military defeat came isolation. Octavian was getting closer and closer to Alexandria, and Mark Antony, plunged into despair, saw no way out but to take his own life. Cleopatra tried to resist, but was soon captured. At this point, Caesarion was no longer just a young prince. It was the last obstacle between Octavian and absolute control of Egypt. When Octavian finally arrived in Alexandria, there were no more armies between him and the throne of Egypt. Marco Antonio was already dead. Cleopatra was taken to the victor, trying to negotiate any kind of truce. But in fact, she had just one request: spare my son. The queen knew that Caesarion was the last piece on the board. If Octavian wanted to rule unchallenged, he needed to get rid of him. And she knew that asking for mercy was risky, but it was the only card she still had in her hands. Octavian, cold and calculating, listened, but he said nothing about the boy's fate. He maintained the appearance of control, feigned diplomacy, and let her go, as if he were still deciding what to do. A few days later, Cleopatra was warned. She would be taken alive to Rome, not as queen, but as a trophy, in chains displayed in Octavian's victory parade. This was the greatest humiliation possible, and she didn't accept it. According to ancient accounts, Cleopatra chose death over shame. He would have allowed himself to be bitten by a poisonous snake, probably taken secretly by someone he trusted. It was the end of the last queen of Egypt. And Caesarion, he was alone, just 17 years old, heir to a ruined dynasty and son of two of the most powerful figures of his time. Octavian no longer needed to pretend. If this content is making sense to you so far, do the following. Give me a signal. Comment 1 below so I know you're with me on this journey. And remember, YouTube only spreads this knowledge if there is a lot of interaction. If you haven't commented yet, now is the time. I want to see this video full of opinion so that this topic continues to reach more people. Without his mother's protection, and with Egypt already under Roman control, Caesarion became a piece off the board, a symbol that needed to be erased. Octavian, now with the path clear to become Lord of Rome, consulted his advisors about what to do with the young man. One of them reportedly said something that sealed the boy's fate. It is not advisable for there to be many Caesars. The message was clear. Caesarion was a threat, even without an army, even without a crown. The mere fact of existing was already too dangerous. And then the order came. Cold, silent, without ceremony. According to Plutarch's accounts, Caesarion was killed by one of Octavian's own soldiers. No judgment, no defense. He died as an enemy of the state. But in practice, he was just a teenager. A boy trained to reign but never had the chance. With his death, the last spark of Egyptian resistance ended. There was no more pharaoh, there was no more dynasty. All that remained was the absolute rule of Rome. Caesarion's death was not just the end of a young man, it was the end of an entire era. With him, the last stone of the Ptolemaic dynasty fell, a lineage that ruled Egypt for almost 300 years. And at the same time, something new and relentless was born. The Roman Empire, now under the absolute control of Octavian, who would soon gain a new name. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Egypt stopped being a kingdom and became the richest province of the empire. Everything that was previously a symbol of independence, culture, and power now responded directly to Rome. And all of this was made possible by a series of cold moves, political alliances, and yes, silent executions like Caesarion's. Therefore, when you hear about great empires and conquests, remember, what survived is not always the fairest side of history. Sometimes it's just the side that knew how to silence the right heirs. If this content impacted you, leave your like, because this helps a lot to keep this channel alive. And if you want to understand even more about the behind the scenes of Rome, click on the video that is now appearing on your screen. There I tell you the details that traditional history preferred to hide. See you there.